Well, hello there and welcome to this week's midweek message. And this is the message, but I also have a lovely film of us on top of Coney's Castle for our Easter sunrise service, and you can watch that afterwards. Oh my word, it was glorious. A very small number came, but it was fantastic. And in fact, this whole Easter season, this time of remembering what Jesus did for us on the cross and celebrating his resurrection is such a glorious time in the church year. And I have to say, even though Lent is a time where we often spend time reflecting on things that perhaps we would rather hadn't happened in our lives, things that we regret or seek God's forgiveness for, I have had a very interesting experience through Lent because I have joined Bishop Karen's Lent Lectio Reflections. I know we've been doing them here in our benefice, and I hope you've enjoyed those, led by Chris, but I mostly couldn't go along to those, so I decided to join the Lent Reflections online on Zoom, led by Bishop Karen. Now there was me thinking that because this was an invitation that went out to the whole diocese and all the clergy in the diocese, that I would be one of many people who went along to that evening reflection. No, that was not the case. Some weeks, I would say, there was 4 of us, including the bishop, and some weeks there was just 1 or 2 of us. And so it was a real opportunity to spend time with her leadership of the Lent Lectios, and also to hear other people, other clergy from around the benefice reflecting on the Bible passage. Anyway, the important things I wanted to tell you about this was that we looked at John 6, and I don't have time to read that to you, but that was the chapter we looked at over the period of 5 weeks. And it's a amazing passage, which Bishop Karen did say at the end, actually sums up the whole of the resurrection story, the whole of the story of salvation for us. It includes the feeding of the 5,000, it includes Jesus walking on the water, it includes Jesus doing some very challenging and difficult teaching about eating his flesh and drinking his blood. It includes a lot of interesting things just in that one short chapter. Anyway, I thought it might be interesting for you to hear some of the things that got teased out for me in the Lent Lectios led by the bishop. So first week was the feeding of the 5,000, and I was particularly struck by the small boy, as in his presence in the story, as in probably he just woke up that morning. It was a normal kind of morning for him. He got ready, he made his packed lunch of the loaves and the fishes, and yet God had the most amazing, important moment, heaven touching earth moment for that boy that day as one of the crowd. And I was particularly encouraged to think about how God uses the everyday, ordinary, and often the small, vulnerable, overlooked and unimportant. At that time, of course, children were not as important as they are these days in society. It was just how it was. It was the culture of the time. I'm just really struck about how God does really take the most vulnerable and works a miracle. I was encouraged by that. Then we looked at Jesus walking on the water, and I was particularly struck by there's a little phrase which talks about how they were 4 miles out at sea, out in the sea. Now 4 miles is quite a long way. Somehow, I don't know how, but I've imagined, when I imagine this story in my head, that the boat was actually quite a lot closer than 4 miles. I've often felt it was kind of close-ish to shore, and somehow the walking wasn't, it was closer to shore. But no, it's 4 miles out, 4 miles out. And that would mean in extremely deep, deep water. I was struck about how Jesus walked that way, 4 miles. And he was actually quite a long way away from the disciples when they started on their journey, and yet he met them where they were. And so I was reminded that sometimes God gives us space to see what we might actually do ourselves. He equips us and he says, go. Go. So I was reminded of that. And then the last thing was in the very difficult Bible passage about Jesus encouraging his disciples to eat his flesh and drink his blood. I was very struck by the word flesh, my flesh, because it repeats several times in the passage and it really hit home for me. And the my flesh, I understood and realised in my spirit, was not just Jesus's flesh, but it was also my flesh, my flesh. And about how when we actually take communion, it is his flesh and our flesh that become one. So, as we continue our journey of celebration through Easter, I pray that as we listen to his word and receive Holy Communion, we will know that one flesh in Jesus Christ. So see you next time. Bye-bye.